On a late afternoon, Dr. Ethan Parker, his wife Ellen, and their 8-year-old daughter Emma spread a checkered blanket under the large oak tree in the central park of the city. It was a majestic tree, whose roots seemed as deep as the memories the couple shared of that very spot. 10 years ago, it was under this tree that Ethan and Ellen first saw each other. Ellen opened the picnic basket, taking out carefully prepared sandwiches, freshly cut fruits, and a small jar of homemade lemonade. Emma ran around the tree, laughing, with Scout, the dog Ethan had rescued and who quickly became part of the family. "Do you remember, Ethan?" Ellen smiled, handing him a glass of lemonade. "You were so focused on that medical book, you almost walked right past me without noticing." Ethan laughed, accepting the glass. "How could I forget? You asked me what I was reading, and I, all flustered, barely managed to formulate a coherent response." "I thought you were being cute," Ellen joked, sitting down beside him, gently leaning on his shoulder. "And then you dropped your papers, and we both bent down to pick them up at the same time." Emma, curious, came closer with Scout trotting behind her. "And then what happened after you guys picked up the papers?" "Well, when our hands touched," Ethan interjected, looking at Ellen with a twinkle in his eyes, "I knew there was something special about your mother. And here we are, 10 years later, in the same place, with our beautiful daughter." Ellen blushed slightly at Ethan's words, while Emma clapped, delighted. "That sounds like a story out of a fairy tale book. And Scout, where does he fit into the story?" "Scout came into our lives a bit later, remember?" Ethan laughed, stroking the dog's fur. "I found him lost, almost like I was before I met your mother. He needed a family just as much as I needed someone to show me the way." "Scout is like a prince then. He saved you, Daddy," Emma exclaimed, hugging the dog who licked her face in response. "Exactly, dear," Ellen said, handing Emma a sandwich. "But remember, we all saved each other in some way." They continued to talk about the early days, about how each little moment had led them here. They laughed about Ethan's blunders, the first disastrous dates, and the attempts to impress each other. It was an afternoon of sharing not just food, but the warmth of feelings that had matured over the years. The sun began to set, coloring the sky with warm hues, reflecting the joy of that peaceful afternoon. Scout, feeling tired, lay down next to Emma, who continued to listen fascinated to her parents' stories. A gentle breeze rustled the tree leaves, as if nature applauded the plot of a life shared with love. It was then that Ethan took Ellen's hand, intertwining his fingers with hers, a simple gesture that sealed the promise of more decades of love and companionship. "You made me the luckiest man in the world, Ellen," he murmured, kissing her softly on the forehead. Ellen smiled, resting her head on Ethan's shoulder. "And you gave me an entire world, Ethan. A world of love and a wonderful family." As daylight faded, little Emma looked up at her parents with admiration, feeling secure and loved. It was a perfect end to the day, and the beginning of another beautiful evening under the stars. After a peaceful family breakfast, Dr. Ethan Parker prepared for another day at work. Ellen was adjusting his tie while Emma played with her colorful socks on the kitchen floor. "Are you going to be home late today?" Ellen asked as Ethan organized his briefcase. "I hope not," he replied, giving her a quick kiss. "But you know how it is, sometimes surgeries can run long." Ellen smiled, a touch of worry in her expression. "Just don't forget to eat, Ethan. And try not to worry too much, okay?" "I promise I'll try," he laughed, bending down to kiss Emma on the forehead, who looked up at him with admiration. "And you, young lady, be good for Mommy today, okay?" "Okay, Daddy. I'll draw something for you to bring home," Emma exclaimed, running to fetch her colored pencils. Ethan left, waving to his family as he headed to his car. The day at the hospital was long and exhausting, filled with several consultations and a complicated surgery that demanded his full attention. By the time it ended, the sun was already setting, painting the sky orange and pink. On his way home, while passing through a less busy street, Ethan noticed something moving in a pile of leaves next to the sidewalk. Stopping the car, he got out to investigate and found a small dog, clearly injured, trying to shelter from the cold. "Hey buddy, what happened to you?" Ethan murmured, kneeling beside the animal. The dog looked up at him with initial fear but did not move, as if understanding that Ethan wanted to help. Carefully, Ethan picked up the dog and placed it on the passenger seat of the car, covering it with his jacket. He drove straight to the vet, concerned about the animal's condition. At the vet's office, the veterinarian examined the dog and informed Ethan that it was dehydrated and had an injured paw. "He's going to need care and a safe place to recover," the veterinarian explained. "I'll take care of him," Ethan decided impulsively. "Let's call him Scout." "Good choice," the veterinarian smiled, handing Scout back to Ethan, now medicated and a bit more spirited. Arriving home with Scout, Ethan found Emma playing in the garden. Upon seeing the dog, her eyes immediately lit up. "Who is this, Daddy?" she asked, running towards them. "This is Scout. He was hurt and needed help, so we decided to bring him home," Ethan explained, watching Emma carefully touch the dog, who licked her hand in response. "Can he stay with us, Daddy? Please?" Emma looked at Ethan with hopeful eyes. "Of course he can," Ethan smiled, happy to see the quick connection between his daughter and the new family member. "But you have to help me take care of him, okay?" "I promise," Emma exclaimed, gently hugging Scout. "We're going to be best friends." Ellen came out to see what was causing all the excitement and smiled at the scene. "Looks like we have a new family member," she commented, kissing Ethan on the cheek. "You always with your big heart." The night fell over the Parker family as they settled down for dinner, with Scout sleeping peacefully in a corner of the kitchen. Ethan watched his family, feeling grateful and somehow complete. It was a perfect end to a day that started like any other but brought with it a new life to care for. However, what Ethan did not know was that his routine would soon be disrupted by a work trip that would bring unexpected challenges and temptations, altering the course of their lives once again. Ethan was organizing his documents and final preparations for an important neurosurgery conference in another city. While Ellen helped him fold his clothes and pack them into the suitcase, she felt a twinge of concern. "How long will you be away this time?" Ellen asked, trying to hide the anxiety in her voice. "Just a few days. I'll be back Thursday night," Ethan replied, trying to reassure her with a smile. He knew his frequent trips were hard on Ellen, especially with Emma still so young. On the way to the airport, Ethan thought about his family, feeling a mix of guilt and responsibility. Arriving there, he quickly went through check-in and security, heading to his departure gate. Upon boarding the plane, Ethan found his window seat and settled in, putting on his headphones and preparing to review some of his work documents during the flight. However, his plans were interrupted when a woman took the seat next to him. She was notably attractive, with a presence that seemed to draw looks wherever she went. "Excuse me, is this seat 12B?" she asked with a charming smile, holding a ticket in one hand and a small handbag in the other. "Yes, it is," Ethan replied, removing his headphones. "Can I help with your luggage?" "Thank you, that would be great," she said as Ethan stood to accommodate her bag in the overhead compartment. "My name is Amelia Miller," she introduced herself, extending her hand after settling in. "Ethan Parker," he responded, shaking her hand lightly. The plane began to taxi on the runway, and the conversation between them flowed with surprising ease. Amelia was engaging, talking about her work in marketing and her travels around the world. Ethan found himself laughing more than he expected, and the connection between them seemed natural and instantaneous. "Do you travel a lot for work?" Amelia asked, leaning forward slightly, interested. "Yes, quite a bit. The nature of my job demands it," Ethan explained, and then, feeling the need to establish boundaries, added, "My wife and daughter are at home. They aren't big fans of my travels, but it's part of the job." Amelia nodded, her smile unwavering. "It must be hard to balance everything. It's good to have someone who understands the importance of your work." Ethan felt a twinge of discomfort. "Yes, they are very understanding," he said, turning his gaze to the window, watching the clouds. As the in-flight service began, Amelia continued the conversation, clearly interested in Ethan, asking personal questions and laughing at his jokes. Ethan, on the other hand, maintained a friendly courtesy but was increasingly aware of the attraction that Amelia exerted. As they landed, Amelia suggested, "Maybe we could grab a coffee when you're free? It would be nice to continue our conversation." Ethan hesitated, aware of the danger of the situation. I appreciate the offer, but my schedule is quite full with the conference," he responded, trying to keep polite. "Of course, I completely understand," Amelia said, though her expression showed a slight disappointment. "But here's my card, in case you change your mind." Ethan accepted the card, thanking her for the pleasant company on the flight. They said goodbye at the terminal, each heading to their respective engagements. Arriving at the hotel, Ethan thought about the conversation they had. Amelia was undeniably charming and intelligent. As he prepared for the conference, he couldn't help but feel curious about what might have happened if circumstances were different. With the conference about to start, Ethan tried to focus on his work, but the image of Amelia and her smile persisted in his mind, anticipating an encounter that might redefine the course of his stay in that city. The conference had been intense and productive. Dr. Ethan Parker had presented his latest study on innovative techniques in neurosurgery, receiving praise and questions from colleagues from around the world. Feeling satisfied yet exhausted from the busy day, Ethan decided to join some colleagues who were heading to a local bar, planning to unwind a bit before retiring. The atmosphere of the bar was lively, with dim lights and soft music in the background. Ethan ordered a whiskey and leaned against the bar, watching people around him engage in lively conversations. His thoughts wandered back home to Ellen and Emma when a familiar voice pulled him from his reverie. "Ethan, what a surprise to find you here!" Amelia exclaimed with a radiant smile, approaching him in an elegant cocktail dress that enhanced her features. "Amelia, hi," Ethan responded, a bit taken aback. "Are you here to relax after the conference too?" "Exactly," she said, ordering a drink from the bartender. "After a whole day of listening to lectures, a good drink is what I need to unwind. Do you mind if I join you?" "Of course, feel free," Ethan replied, moving to give her space. Despite his internal reservations, Amelia's company was undeniably pleasant. They talked about various topics, from the nuances of their careers to travels and hobbies. Amelia was an excellent storyteller, and Ethan found himself laughing and engaging more in the conversation than he had planned. "You really have a way of making everything seem so fascinating," Ethan commented, somewhat intoxicated by the combination of alcohol and Amelia's charisma. She smiled, lightly touching his arm. "You're not too bad with your stories, Dr. Parker. It must be amazing to save lives every day." As the evening progressed, the barrier Ethan had carefully built began to crumble under the weight of exhaustion and alcohol. Amelia, noticing his vulnerability, became more suggestive, leaning in closer and sharing casual laughs and touches that sent waves of warmth through Ethan's body. "It's getting late," Ethan observed, looking at his watch after a long silence, his voice a bit uncertain. "Don't you want to extend the night in a quieter place?" Amelia suggested with a look that mixed challenge and promise. "My hotel room is just a block away." Ethan hesitated. The image of Ellen and Emma flashed in his mind, bringing a wave of guilt, but it was quickly overshadowed by the proximity and the scent of Amelia. "Just a little longer," he heard himself say, against his better judgment. They left the bar and walked in silence to the hotel where Amelia was staying. Entering her room, the atmosphere changed, becoming more intimate and charged. Amelia went straight to the minibar, pouring 2 glasses of wine. "Ethan, I really enjoyed our talk today," she said softly, handing him a glass. "I hope you did too." Ethan accepted the wine, his thoughts dangerously spinning between duty and desire. I did too," he murmured, and before he could regain his composure, Amelia had approached and kissed him. The combination of exhaustion, alcohol, and Amelia's enveloping presence was too much for Ethan to resist. That night, under the soft lights of the hotel room, Ethan succumbed to Amelia's charms, a decision that would reverberate through his life in ways he could not foresee. As Ethan allowed himself to be carried away by the moment, a part of him knew that the repercussions of that night would be inevitable. However, at that hour, all concerns were silenced by the warmth of the encounter, marking the beginning of a sequence of events that would challenge everything he valued. In the days following Ethan's return from his work trip, Ellen couldn't help but notice a subtle yet significant change in his behavior. He seemed distant, lost in thought, and his laughter, which once warmly echoed throughout the house, now sounded forced and sparse. Ellen watched, with a heavy heart, as her husband emotionally drifted away from her and Emma. One night, while Ethan was reading a story to Emma before bed, Ellen sat in the living room, her thoughts swirling in her mind. After Emma fell asleep, Ethan came downstairs, finding Ellen sitting quietly, a cup of tea in her hands, her expression worried. "Ethan, we need to talk," Ellen began, hesitantly. "You've been so distant since you came back. Is there something you want to tell me?" Ethan sat beside her, avoiding her gaze. "It's all fine, Ellen. I'm just tired, you know. Work has been exhausting." Ellen shook her head, dissatisfied with the response. "It's not just tiredness, Ethan. I know you. Something else is going on. Please, if there is something, you can tell me." There was a long pause, during which Ethan considered telling the truth, but fear of the consequences held him back. "It's really just work, Ellen," he insisted, forcing a weak smile. In the following days, Ellen's doubts only grew. Determined to find answers, she sought out a private detective, David Richardson, recommended by a friend who had gone through similar situations. David was a serious and professional man. During the meeting in his office, Ellen explained her concerns. "I just want to know the truth, Mr. Richardson. If there's something my husband is hiding, I need to know." David nodded, jotting down details in his notebook. "I'll conduct a discreet investigation, Mrs. Parker. You will have your answers." Over the next few days, David discreetly followed Ethan. With his experience, it didn't take long for him to notice Ethan's clandestine meetings with an unknown woman, Amelia. Capturing photographs and gathering information, David compiled a detailed report. When Ellen received a call from David to meet, her heart was apprehensive. In his office, the photos and reports on the table confirmed her worst fears. "As you can see, Mrs. Parker, your husband has been meeting with this woman frequently since he returned from the trip," David explained, passing the photos to her. Ellen looked at the images with a mix of pain and disbelief. "Thank you, Mr. Richardson," she said, her voice trembling. "I needed to know, but this is harder than I imagined." Returning home, Ellen was in a whirlwind of emotions. She knew she needed to confront Ethan, but how could she start a conversation that would break what remained of her heart? That night, when Ethan came home, he found Ellen sitting in the same chair in the living room, the photos spread out on the table in front of her. He froze at the door, realizing what this meant. "Ethan," Ellen began, her voice firm despite the inner tremor, "we need to talk about this." Ethan felt the world collapsing around him, knowing that the lies had come to an end. The confession and the consequences of his actions were inevitable, marking the beginning of a conversation that would change their lives forever. Ethan stared at the photographs scattered across the coffee table, each one a direct blow to his heart. Ellen, with tear-filled eyes, sat rigidly, resembling a statue of dismay. "Ellen, Elsie," Ethan began, his voice faltering under the weight of his own betrayal. "How could you, Ethan?" Ellen interrupted, her voice choked with pain and betrayal. "How could you do this to our family?" Ethan swallowed hard, feeling each of Ellen's words like needles in his conscience. He sat down across from her, trying to find the right words, but knowing nothing he said could undo the damage caused. "I don't know. I don't know what came over me. I never meant to hurt you, Ellen. It all started as an innocent conversation and..." I let myself get carried away, Ethan confessed, his gaze fixed on his trembling hands. An innocent conversation doesn't lead someone to another person's bed, Ethan. Ellen exclaimed, tears beginning to freely run down her face. I trusted you. I dedicated my life to this family, and while I was at home taking care of our daughter, worried about you, you were... Her voice broke, choked by emotion. Ethan felt the weight of the world on his shoulders. He wanted to comfort her, but knew any attempt would be futile. I know it's unforgivable, Ellen. I really lost control of the situation. I'm so sorry, he said, his own tears beginning to form. Regret doesn't change what you did, Ethan. It doesn't change the fact that you've destroyed our family, Ellen stated firmly. Did you think of Emma? How this would affect her if she found out? Did you think of me? Ethan lowered his head, unable to meet Ellen's gaze. I didn't think, he admitted. I only thought of myself. It was selfish, and I am so sorry for that. Ellen took a deep breath, trying to compose herself. I need you to leave, Ethan. I need space to think and decide how we are going to proceed from here. Ethan looked at Ellen, the reality of her words hitting him like a punch. Where I go doesn't matter. What matters is that you have the time and space you need. I'll stay at a hotel. If you need anything at all, don't hesitate to call. Standing up, he walked slowly to the door, his life crumbling behind him with each step he took. Before leaving, he turned to look one last time at the woman he had loved more than himself. I am truly sorry, Ellen. I would give anything to go back in time and fix this, he murmured, before stepping out and closing the door behind him, leaving behind a heavy silence and a broken heart. In the solitude of her desolation, Ellen sat, contemplating the emotional abyss that now opened before her. The decision to send Ethan away had been painful but necessary. The future was uncertain, and she knew that the next steps would require strength she wasn't sure she possessed. As Ellen contemplated her new reality, news of a tragic accident would soon arrive, further altering the course of their lives and forcing them to face even more challenges together, despite the chasm that now separated them. After leaving the home he shared with Ellen and Emma, Ethan felt a profound and distressing emptiness. The cold night breeze seemed to cut deeper than usual as he drove to Amelia's apartment. The city lights blinked indifferently, reflecting his internal turmoil. Upon arriving, Amelia greeted him with a captivating smile, which momentarily eased the weight on his chest. Ethan, darling, you're here. Let me take your things, she said, approaching to kiss him and take his suitcase. Ethan entered the apartment, his gaze wandering through the elegantly and meticulously decorated space. It was a different world from the warm home he had with Ellen and Emma. Amelia led him to the sofa, sitting beside him and holding his hand. Ethan, I know this is hard, but you're making the right choice. We're in this together, Amelia began, her voice soft, trying to instill confidence. Ethan looked at her, his eyes still clouded with pain. Amelia, I left my family. I never thought I would do something like this. What if it's a mistake? Amelia squeezed his hand tighter. Look, Ethan, you weren't happy, and now you have a chance to start over. With me. But you need to fully commit to this, to us. You understand, right? There can be no going back to Ellen. Amelia's words were like hooks that slowly rooted in his weary heart. The uncertainty and fear of loneliness made him vulnerable to her suggestions. I understand, he murmured. It's just that everything happened so fast. Fast life, remember? That's how we both are, Amelia smiled, trying to lift his spirits. Now, let's have dinner. I prepared something special for us. The evening proceeded with Amelia making every effort to please Ethan, but despite the laughter and affectionate gestures, a shadow of doubt lingered over Ethan. He knew, deep down, that this new life would require sacrifices he was still not sure he was ready to make. In the following days, the pressure to completely sever ties with his old life increased. Amelia monitored his calls and subtly suggested he should change his phone number. "It's for our good, Ethan. We need privacy and a fresh start, without interruptions from your past," she explained. Reluctantly, but unable to mount significant resistance, Ethan agreed. With each step he took with Amelia, he moved further away from Ellen and Emma, his guilt growing in proportion to his compliance. One morning, while Amelia was in the shower, Ethan looked out the apartment window, watching the city wake up. The reflection in the glass showed a man he barely recognized. "What am I doing?" he whispered to himself, a question without an answer. Meanwhile, far from there, a tragic accident was about to happen, one that would bring devastating consequences for all of them. As Ethan struggled with his choices, fate intervened in an abrupt and cruel manner, promising to change the course of their lives once again. The night had already fallen when Ethan's phone vibrated insistently on the coffee table, breaking the comfortable silence of the apartment he now shared with Amelia. He was about to ignore it, assuming it was a late call from the hospital, when the name on the display made his heart stop: Major Ryan Bennett. Ethan answered immediately, feeling a wave of apprehension. "Major Bennett, is something wrong?" The Major's voice was laden with gravity, an ominous undertone in the formal lines of his speech. "Dr. Parker, I regret having to inform you in this manner, but there has been an accident. Your wife, Ellen, was involved." Ethan's world spun. "How is she? Is Ellen okay?" he asked, his voice trembling with the urgency of the question. There was a hesitant pause on the other line. "I'm sorry, Dr. Parker. Ellen did not survive her injuries." Bennett's words were like a punch in the stomach, draining all the color from Ethan's world. Amelia, noticing the abrupt change in the atmosphere, quickly approached. "What happened, Ethan? Who was that?" "It was Major Bennett," Ethan replied, his voice almost inaudible. "Ellen, she's dead, Amelia." Amelia stepped back for a moment, her expression mixing surprise and confusion. "Oh, Ethan, that's terrible. But what are we going to do?" Ethan barely heard her words, lost in the avalanche of emotions engulfing him. I have to go, Amelia. Emma. She needs me now more than ever." Amelia frowned, clearly uncomfortable with the situation. "Ethan, think this through. This is a tragic moment, but you have to consider what this means. Emma here. With us. Amelia, she's my daughter." Ethan exclaimed, frustration evident in his tone. "I have to be there for her. Ellen is gone. I'm all Emma has now." The atmosphere in the apartment became tense, with Amelia clearly reluctant to accept the new reality that Emma's presence would impose on her life with Ethan. "I understand you want to take care of her, Ethan, but we need to think this through calmly. Our life together will change drastically," Amelia argued, trying to keep her voice calm. "There's nothing to think about, Amelia," Ethan countered, the decision clear in his voice as he grabbed his car keys. "I'm going to the hospital. I'll make arrangements for the funeral. And I'm bringing Emma home." With one final look of farewell, Ethan left the apartment, leaving Amelia alone with her conflicting thoughts. As he drove to the hospital, tears began to freely run down Ethan's face. The pain of losing Ellen was unbearable, but the need to be strong for Emma propelled him forward. Upon arriving at the hospital, he was greeted by a nurse who guided him to where Emma was. The little girl sat in a waiting room, small and vulnerable, her big eyes full of confusion and sadness. "Daddy!" she exclaimed upon seeing him, running into his arms. Ethan hugged her tightly, feeling the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. "I'm here, sweetheart. Everything will be all right," he whispered, though inside his heart, doubts and fears simmered. As he comforted Emma, Ethan knew the coming days would be challenging. But he was determined to face any adversity, not anticipating that the situation at home with Amelia would become even more complicated, further exacerbating the tension and challenges he would have to face. In the days following Ellen's funeral, The house that once echoed with laughter and warmth now resonated with the dull sound of silence and unresolved tensions. Ethan, facing the reality of being a single father, tried to balance his grief with the needs of Emma, who sought to understand her mother's absence in ways that broke his heart repeatedly. Amelia, for her part, grew increasingly impatient. The constant presence of Emma and the abrupt changes in her relationship dynamics with Ethan left her frustrated. She had envisioned a different future with Ethan, one freer and less complicated. "I just don't understand why everything has to change so much," Amelia lamented one night, as they argued in the kitchen after Emma had gone to bed. "I thought we would have more freedom together." Ethan, washing dishes, stopped and turned to face her. "Amelia, when Ellen died, everything changed. I didn't expect you to fully understand, but Emma is my daughter. She needs me now more than ever. And me." Amelia crossed her arms, her voice tinged with resentment. "Where do I fit in this new life you're sketching out for us?" Ethan sighed, the exhaustion weighing on his eyelids. "You are important to me, Amelia, but I can't turn my back on my daughter. I thought you might understand that." "Understand?" Amelia laughed bitterly. "Ethan, understanding would be easier if you hadn't promised that we'd be each other's priority." Ethan felt the weight of her words, but also began to realize that his promise to Amelia had been hasty, made in a moment of vulnerability and a desire for escape from his previous life. In the days that followed, Ethan began to observe Amelia more critically. She rarely interacted with Emma, except to express frustration about how the girl's presence altered their plans. Ethan began to wonder if he had really known Amelia, or if he had fallen for the idea of someone who could offer him an uncomplicated fresh start. One night, while Emma slept and Amelia had gone out with friends, Ethan sat in Emma's room, watching her sleep. Moonlight filtered through the window, illuminating her serene face. Silent tears began to stream down Ethan's face as he reflected on the choices he had made. "I made a mistake, Ellen," he whispered into the void, as if he could reach his late wife. "I lost so much of myself trying to escape the pain." That night, as the house slept, Ethan made a decision. He could no longer live a lie, nor could he let Amelia's bitterness poison the little peace he and Emma could still have. The next morning, when Amelia returned, Ethan was waiting, firm and resolute. "Amelia, we need to talk. This isn't working. I can't be the man you want me to be, not at this cost." Amelia looked at him, surprised and then furious. "So that's it? You're choosing her over us?" "I'm choosing my daughter, yes," Ethan confirmed, the clarity of his purpose renewing his strength. The discussion that followed was harsh and filled with painful words, but necessary. In the end, Amelia left, leaving Ethan and Emma to rebuild their lives, a decision that marked the beginning of a new journey for Ethan, one of redemption and reconnection with his true values and priorities. After the painful separation from Amelia, Ethan was trying to reorganize his life, focusing on rebuilding his relationship with his daughter and adjusting to his new reality as a single father. However, fate had other plans. On a rainy afternoon, while Ethan was driving back home after picking up some of Emma's belongings from school, his thoughts were scattered, reflecting on the recent changes in his life. The rain pounded heavily on the windshield, and visibility was poor. Distracted by a moment of deep reflection, Ethan didn't notice the truck that had lost control on the opposite lane. The impact was violent and sudden. Ethan's world spun into chaos of shattered glass and twisted metal. He lost consciousness before he could even process what was happening. When Ethan woke up, he was in a hospital room, his body immobile and a piercing pain invading his senses. The sound of machines beeping and the murmur of medical voices filled the air. He tried to move his legs, but they didn't respond. A cold terror settled in his chest. "Dr. Parker, you're awake," said a calm voice beside him. It was his neurologist, Dr. Simmons, who held her clipboard tightly against her chest. "You've been in a serious accident. We've been monitoring your condition closely." "And my legs?" Ethan asked, his voice hoarse with fear and pain. Dr. Simmons hesitated, choosing her words carefully. You've sustained significant damage to your spinal cord. We're doing everything we can, but you're paraplegic, Ethan."
"I'm sorry."
The words fell like a weight, crushing the little spirit left in Ethan. Tears of frustration and despair began to flow freely down his face. He barely noticed when Amelia entered the room, her face a mask of forced concern. "Ethan, darling, I heard about the accident," Amelia began, approaching the bed. "Amelia," Ethan interrupted, bitterness tinting his voice. "Why are you here?" "Ethan, I care about you. I wanted to see how you are," she replied, her voice trembling with an emotion not entirely sincere. "Amelia, I need to be honest," Ethan said, gathering all his strength. "I need people around me who truly care. I need truth and commitment, things I don't think we can offer each other." Amelia was silent for a moment, then turned, her face hardening. "If that's how you feel, then there's nothing more I can do here." Without another word, she left the room, leaving Ethan alone with his pain and his new world. Ethan stared at the closed door for a long time, processing the dual loss, his mobility and, in a way, his last connection to a past he now needed to leave behind. In that moment of extreme solitude, he realized that the journey ahead would be one of the most challenging of his life. As Ethan faced the reality of his condition and Amelia's abandonment, concern for Emma filled him with determination. He knew that, regardless of his physical ability, he had to be strong for her. It was this thought that would sustain him through the dark days to come, a beacon of hope and purpose amid the devastation. In the days following the accident, Ethan's hospital room became a small sanctuary of love and care, where his daughter Emma and his mother took turns with constant visits. Little Emma, with eyes full of concern that seemed too big for her age, often held her father's hand, whispering words of encouragement. "Hey, Dad, you need to see the drawing I made at school today," Emma said during one of these visits, trying to cheer Ethan up with her colorful art. "It's a superhero. He might not walk, but he flies with jetpacks. Just like you, he's strong." Ethan smiled, touched by Emma's innocence and imagination. "That's amazing, sweetheart. Do you really think I'm as strong as a superhero?" "Of course," Emma replied without hesitation. "You're the strongest daddy in the world." Ethan's mother, a lady with silver hair and wise eyes, was also often by his side, holding his other hand and offering her own kind of comfort. "Ethan, you've been through a lot," she said on one occasion, while Emma played beside them with her colored pencils. "But you have a chance now, a chance to start over in a way that makes sense, to rebuild something beautiful with your daughter." Ethan looked at his mother, his eyes welling up. "Mom, I've made so many mistakes. I got carried away by things that should never have been important. I've hurt the people I love. How do I start to fix this?" "One day at a time, my son," his mother replied, squeezing his hand firmly. "Recognizing your mistakes is the first step. Now, you work to do the right things, to be the father that Emma deserves, and to be the man I always knew you could be." Ethan spent many hours looking out the hospital window, reflecting on his mother's words and Emma's unconditional love. He thought of Ellen, the love they shared, and how he strayed from that path. The pain of loss, both physical and emotional, was almost unbearable, but the presence of his family brought a comfort he didn't know was still possible to feel. "I promise, Emma, I promise, Mom," Ethan murmured while they were out of the room, alone with his thoughts. "I'll be better. I'll get this right." As the sun set, bathing the room in golden hues, Ethan felt a mix of pain and hope. He knew the path ahead would be challenging, but now he had something to fight for. Not just his physical recovery, but the rebuilding of broken bonds and the creation of new foundations for his life and Emma's. Days later, with Emma by his side, Ethan began planning how they would adapt their home to his new reality. He was determined to turn every barrier into an opportunity to learn and grow. However, he did not yet know that an even greater challenge was coming, one that would test his newly found resolve more than he could imagine. The months following the accident were a period of intense adjustments and continuous learning for Ethan. Each day presented its own set of challenges as he adapted to life in a wheelchair. His home was modified for his new reality, with access ramps and support bars installed at strategic locations. Determined to maintain as much independence as possible, Ethan often found himself frustrated by his physical limitations, but the presence of Emma and the ongoing support from his mother propelled him forward. "Hey, Dad, look what I brought from school today," Emma exclaimed one afternoon, running up to him with a science book in hand. "Can we read it together? There's a chapter about the stars, and I thought we could learn about them." Ethan smiled, his heart warming with his daughter's tireless curiosity. "Of course, sweetheart. Let's see what we can discover about the stars," he said, adjusting himself in his chair to make it easier for her to snuggle next to him. As he read to Emma, Ethan felt a sense of purpose that had been absent during his darkest days. Each page turned was a reminder that, despite everything, he had a crucial reason to strive: to be a good father to Emma. The physiotherapy sessions were exhausting and often painful, but Ethan faced each one with unwavering resolve. His physiotherapist, an energetic woman named Marianne, was a force of nature who wouldn't let him give up. "Ethan, I know it's hard, but you're making incredible progress," Marianne encouraged him during a particularly challenging session. "Remember, each little movement is a victory." "I'm trying, Marianne. I just didn't want Emma to see me struggle so much," Ethan confessed, as he attempted to transfer from the chair to an exercise mat. "She sees you struggling, yes, but she also sees you overcoming," Marianne replied, helping him stabilize. "That's teaching her about determination and courage, Ethan. You're showing her how to face adversity, not just with words, but with actions." Marianne's words stayed with Ethan, echoing in his mind during moments of doubt. He wanted Emma to see in him an example of perseverance, not just a reflection of his circumstances. At home, the dynamic between father and daughter grew stronger every day. They developed a routine that included time for homework, shared readings, and, whenever possible, small outdoor adventures. "Daddy, when I grow up, I want to be strong like you," Emma said one evening as they looked at the stars through the telescope Ethan had set up in their backyard. Moved, Ethan looked at his daughter, seeing in her not just the traits of Ellen but also the signs of an extraordinary young person growing up before his eyes. "And you will be, Emma. You already are." With each passing day, Ethan rebuilt his life, finding new ways to connect with the world and with the people he loved. He knew there were still many challenges ahead, but he felt equipped to face them, supported by his daughter's love and the new life perspective he had gained through his journey of recovery and redemption. However, as he adapted to this new reality, the approaching birthday of Emma brought new expectations and surprises, signaling the start of a new phase in their lives and the promise of new beginnings. Emma's 11th birthday was approaching, and Ethan was determined to make this day memorable for her, despite the whirlwind of emotions he was facing himself. In the days leading up to the birthday, he got involved in all the preparations, carefully choosing themes and decorations he knew would bring a smile to Emma's face. "Is it going to be a princess party, Daddy?" Emma asked with sparkling eyes as they hung colorful light garlands around the yard. "Not exactly a princess, but something you'll love even more," Ethan smiled, keeping the surprise he had planned. A space adventure theme, complete with stars, planets, and even a small telescope for the kids to use. On the day of the party, Ethan's house was filled with the laughter and excited shouts of children running back and forth. He had hired an entertainer who came dressed as an astronaut, telling stories about the universe and teaching the kids about constellations. Emma was radiant, dressed in a t-shirt that glowed with an image of the Milky Way. She ran up to Ethan, who was adjusting the lens of the telescope, and hugged him tightly. "Thank you, Daddy. It's the best birthday ever." Ethan returned the hug, feeling a mix of joy and sadness. "Anything for you, my little star explorer." As the afternoon gave way to evening, the guests began to say their goodbyes, and the yard soon became quiet, except for the soft hum of the lights. Ethan sat down beside Emma, who was playing with one of the gifts she had received, a space science kit. "Daddy," Emma began, looking at him with a thoughtful expression. "You're happy, aren't you? With the party, I mean." Ethan smiled, stroking her hair. "I'm very happy because you're happy. But you know, love, sometimes I still miss Mommy a lot." Emma nodded, understanding more than Ethan expected. "I miss her too, Daddy. But she would want us to be happy, right?" "Right," Ethan agreed, feeling tears threaten to appear. "She definitely would." The two sat in silence for a moment, looking up at the starry sky above them. Ethan felt a deep connection with Emma, knowing that, despite the pain and loss, they were finding ways to heal together. Later, after Emma had fallen asleep, Ethan stayed out in the yard, staring at the stars. The birthday had been a success, but the day also revived memories of Ellen that he cherished deeply in his heart. The loneliness of the night highlighted her absence. However, as the night progressed, a new determination began to form in Ethan. Inspired by his love for his daughter and the memories of Ellen, he began to contemplate ways to channel his grief into something productive. Perhaps it was time to start a project they had dreamed of together, something that would not only honor Ellen's memory but also provide a legacy of love and discovery for Emma. As Ethan mapped out these plans, he was unaware that he would soon face new challenges that would test his newfound strength in ways he could never have imagined. On a sunny Saturday morning, Ethan decided to take Emma to the park where many significant chapters of his life with Ellen had unfolded. It was the same park where he and Ellen had first met during a music festival, where he had proposed to her under the old oak tree, and where now he sought to reconnect with those memories while building new ones with Emma. "Why did we come here, Daddy?" Emma asked curiously, holding Ethan's hand as they walked along the gravel path lined with sturdy trees and vibrant flowers. "This park is a very special place for me and your mom," Ethan began, his eyes sweeping the familiar scenery. "It's where a lot of important things happened, and I wanted to share that with you." Emma looked around with interest, taking in the beauty of the park that was alive with the sound of birds and the distant laughter of other families. They arrived at the old oak tree, and Ethan helped Emma sit on one of the lower branches. "You know, it was right here that I asked your mom to marry me." "Really?" Emma asked, her eyes wide with revelation. "Yes," Ethan smiled, sitting next to her. "And she said yes, which was one of the best things that ever happened in my life." Emma smiled, touching the trunk of the tree as if she could feel the history etched in the bark. "You miss her, don't you?" Ethan took a deep breath, the weight of Emma's question pressing on his heart. "Every day," he admitted. "But she left me the best gift in the world," he said, looking at Emma with affection. Emma leaned in and hugged Ethan. "I love you too, Daddy. Let's do lots of fun things together, okay?" "Of course, my dear." Ethan hugged her back, his heart filling with a mix of sadness and joy. Watching Emma play around the tree, running and laughing with the freedom of a child who had yet to know the depths of adult pain, Ethan felt tears well up. "Ellen," he whispered to the wind, "I promised to take care of her. I promised to give her the happy life you always wanted for us. I'll protect her and love her with everything I have." Ethan watched Emma, who resembled Ellen in the small gestures and expressions, reaffirming his silent promise. The memory of Ellen, rooted in the beauty of the park, in Emma's smiles, and in Ethan's promises, seemed like a bridge between the past and the future. As the sun began to set, painting the sky orange and pink, Ethan knew his journey was far from easy, but the promises made that day in the park reinforced his commitment to move forward, not just for himself, but for Emma and the memory of Ellen. Walking back through the park, with Emma's hand secure in his, Ethan felt strengthened by his resolve. Yet, he was unaware that the future held new challenges that would test his strength and dedication in ways he could never have anticipated. As the sun set, tinting the sky with hues of orange and violet, Ethan and Emma sat on a bench under the ancient oak, the same place that had been the backdrop for so many pivotal moments in Ethan's life. As twilight approached, father and daughter shared a quiet moment, reflecting on the past and the future. "Daddy," Emma began, breaking the comfortable silence that had formed between them, "you always tell stories about Mom here in this park. It feels magical, like she's still with us in some way. Ethan smiled, looking at his daughter with a mix of admiration and melancholy. You know, Emma, in a way she is. Your mom loved this place, and she loved us both very much. Every memory we share here helps keep her memory alive. Emma nodded, resting her head on her father's shoulder. I like that. I like to think that she's watching over us and smiling. I like that too, Ethan agreed, feeling a peace he hadn't experienced in a long time. He looked up at the sky, where the first stars were beginning to shine. Emma, I want you to know that even in the toughest times, you were the light that guided my way. Everything I've done, and everything I will do from here on out, is to ensure that you have a life full of love and happiness. Emma turned to look at him, her eyes glistening with unshed tears. I know, Daddy, and I love you so much for it. I always want to be here with you, no matter what happens. Ethan hugged her, overwhelmed with emotion. And I will always be here for you, no matter what. And I promise I'll do everything in my power to be the father you deserve. As they talked, a figure approached quietly to the bench where they were sitting. It was a middle-aged woman with gentle features and a warm smile. Ethan looked up, surprised to recognize Marianne, the physiotherapist who had helped him immensely. Marianne, what are you doing here? Ethan asked, both surprised and pleased to see her. I was passing by and saw you too. I didn't want to interrupt, but you seemed so at peace that I couldn't resist, she explained, her gentle gaze shifting from Ethan to Emma. Marianne helped us a lot, Emma, Ethan explained, turning to his daughter. She's one of the reasons I was able to get through the toughest times after the accident. Marianne smiled at Emma. Your dad is one of the strongest people I know, Emma. He worked very hard to get to where he is now. Thank you for helping my dad, Emma said sincerely, offering Marianne a shy smile. Nothing makes me happier, Marianne replied, then looked at Ethan with a twinkle of complicity in her eyes. Ethan, I didn't want to say anything earlier to not pressure you, but the clinic where I work is starting a mentorship program for young people interested in health sciences. I thought you, with all your experience and overcoming story, would be the perfect mentor. Ethan was speechless for a moment, touched by the offer and the opportunity to give back. I would be honored, he finally said, feeling as if a new chapter was beginning, not just for him, but for Emma too. Great, Marianne exclaimed. Let's talk more about this soon. For now, enjoy the rest of your day in the park. As Marianne walked away, Ethan and Emma turned back to watch the sunset, contemplating the new possibilities the future might bring. In silence, Ethan renewed his silent promise to Ellen and to himself, a commitment to live fully, love unconditionally, and guide Emma through life with the same strength and love that Ellen would have wanted. As the sky darkened and the first stars appeared, father and daughter remained seated, facing the future with renewed hope, ready to face together whatever life had in store.
So, if you're not subscribed yet, click on the subscribe button below and join our community. Thank you for your support and see you in the next videos.